Hey guys, welcome back to another video in the r/EntitledPeople subreddit. Today I have two Entitled People stories for you. The first involving a terrible teacher that crushes a third grader's dreams of being an artist by telling the poor 9-year-old that her art is an embarrassment. The second story involves our fave, Karen the crazy neighbor who is unhappy with OP's backyard forge, so she decides to trespass on his property, vandalize his equipment, thus creating a fire and explosive hazard, but thankfully she gets caught, gets arrested, and sent to jail. Karma sure is great, isn't it? But without further ado, let's jump into the stories, shall we? Third grade art critic. Hi everyone! Yesterday I read a story that kind of reminded me of this event that happened back when I was in third grade, about 9 years old. It was around Halloween, and during class we had a lot of small Halloween projects to do. Making ghosts, small decorations, you know the drill. Now in my particular classroom, we had our regular teacher, and there was a student teacher as well. I can't remember the name of the student teacher anymore, so I'll call her Karen, and my regular teacher will just be teacher. The student teacher didn't do much of teaching at this time. I think she was early on in her program, so she mostly just supervised the classroom. For the most part, up until this point, I liked her just fine, and me being me, I really wanted to impress her and be noticed. I was a quiet kid and was bullied quite a lot, so as a result, I didn't have really any friends, and I was very lonely. So one day leading up to Halloween, we are given an assignment to take black construction paper as a background and use other color construction paper to cut out Halloween type objects, ghosts, pumpkins, etc. to make a haunted house picture out of the cutouts. In my school, there was a hallway that everyone traveled through daily to get from one side of the school to the other. So sometimes exceptional work would be hung there to be observed by other members of the school, a kind of bragging wall if you will. So we were told if we did really well, some of our pictures would be hung in this hallway. I was super excited. Here was a chance for me to stand out as something other than a loser. For background, I never understood and I still don't know why I was singled out by my entire grade to be bullied. My family didn't have a lot of money, so I never got to wear cool clothes or anything, but I also didn't look poor or anything. I was well cleaned and kept, but for some reason I lost on the friend lottery. This continued to happen until about 7th grade, where I finally met some nicer kids and have been friends ever since. Anyways, I go to work making my project. Karen walks around the classroom looking at everyone's art and admiring their work, giving pointers and generally making the other kids feel good about their work. Eventually, Karen goes to sit at her desk and students bring up their finished work to see. I'm working hard and have made what I thought was a cool house with a lot of ghosts, pumpkins, bats, a full moon, the works. Or at least what little third grade me could do. Eventually, I get it to where I want the work to be and nervously bring it up to the student teacher to see. I was so excited to find out what she would say about mine. My desk was actually in front of hers, so I had heard all the nice comments she made to the other kids. I hand her my work, and she gives the following critic. Well, OP, I have to say that if I were to select this one to hang in the hallway, I would be completely embarrassed to have this represent our class. I was crushed. I sadly took my picture back while nodding my head and sat down in my seat and cried. I was heartbroken. I had worked so hard, and she thought it was terrible. Teacher came up to me and asked me what was wrong. She asked me if it was something Karen had said. But me, for some reason, not wanting to get her in trouble, I was a real pushover. I said no and continued to cry, but more silently. Sadly, this has no happy ending. It was from this moment that I believed I couldn't draw and do any art and completely gave up on it. I look back and wish I had said something or stood up for myself. But I was such a lonely and sad kid, I guess I wanted to do anything to feel accepted. I'm better now. I still have no art skill because I never worked on it, but I think, because of my experience, I have learned how to hopefully raise my son to be a stronger person than I was. Time will tell. Oh, my heart. I too was the lonely weirdo in elementary school that only had 1 or 2 friends, so I feel for OP. I never understand why people with no hearts become teachers. You're teaching 3rd grade, not art students at an institution. Of course their art sucks. They're in 3rd grade. So you lie to them and tell them it's amazing and not crush a 9-year-old's dreams. I wish I could give OP a hug and go back in time and be her friend and report Karen's ass to the principal. The Bane of Blacksmiths. So a little bit of background. When I was approximately 14, I got into forging knives with the most basic equipment. Literally just charcoal and fire bricks for the forge and a hammer and tongs for my actual equipment. And I've been doing this for roughly 6 years. Once or twice a week, but when COVID started, I had a whole lot more time on my hands as my work was closed for 4 months, but reopened with limited hours. So now I have more time, but still have income, so I decided to put a little money into my forge equipment. This all happened last week. Out of courtesy to my neighbors, I told all of them that I'd be making more noise as I was picking up the frequency that I used my forge as I got new equipment, all of who were fine with it. One of them being excited as he wanted me to make him a knife, all except one, my next door neighbor, who I'll call Kay. Can you guess which name that stands for? Now Kay used to be friendly towards my family until about 4 years ago, due to her not respecting our political views, so we stopped inviting her over and tended to avoid her since she'd try to make arguments at every turn. At most I'll say good morning and ask, how are you? Anyways, I'm kind of off track. The issue she had with it was, I don't want you polluting my yard with the smoke it's gonna make. And despite me explaining it's a propane forge, it doesn't produce much of any smoke, she still demanded that I don't do it. I ignored that, of course, as she can't tell me what to do on my own property, and it was really just a formality to let my neighbors know. So I set up my forge in my backyard, put down gravel so there wasn't any fire hazard, lined it with bricks, and was putting the forge together and fixing it to the large flat stone I decided to set it on. She comes over as I'm doing this and walks into my backyard without me noticing and opens with, "I said you can't do that." I jump as I had no clue she was there, and that's when the fun starts. She begins yelling about how I said I wouldn't put anything back there. I didn't, how she'd get the HOA involved, of which our neighborhood doesn't even have one. And when I informed her of that, she threatened to call the police, which was ridiculous. I responded with, "Get off my land before I call the cops on you." And she left, and I kept setting up my forge. Pass a week, I treat the forge with no issues, and as of 2 days ago, I was working on my first knife out of it. When a guy walks up to my fence and asks if I was the homeowner, I respond yes, look up from my forge, and who's about 50 feet away on the sidewalk with her arms crossed, with a smug look on her face? Kay. So I ask what I can do for him, and he says, "I'm with county. I'm a building inspector, and I got a report from your neighbors. You were building a permanent structure without a permit." I say, "No. Last thing I built was this," and gestured at my forge. He looks around and says, "Are you planning on building anything or expanding any existing structure?" I respond, "Nope." And he simply writes it down, and he asks what it is, and me and him chat about the forge for about 15 minutes before Kay, irritated because I'm not getting in trouble, storms over and in her shrill, annoying voice demands, "What are you doing? He broke county ordinance, so make him get rid of it." And the following conversation was essentially just, "No, I didn't," and "Yeah, nothing's wrong here." And it ended with her walking off and then driving off in her SUV. The inspector was cool, and we chatted for a bit longer. Cut to yesterday. I walk out to start the forge, and while I'm getting ready to start the propane, I notice something pretty important. The line feeding into my forge is cut, and the bracket and copper tube on the tank is bent inwards, with one of the bricks from the border of the gravel laying about 6 feet away in the grass. I'm confused for a minute before realizing what happened here. I take out my phone to check my backyard motion camera to see if there's any movement. Sure enough, there was movement through the night. The normal wildlife. A fox, 2 raccoons, a house cat, and Kay, walking into my backyard with what looked like garden shears. And about 5 minutes later, her jogging out of my yard. So after downloading the footage to my phone and computer, taking pictures of the damage, and ordering new parts for my forge, I called the non-emergency police number and talked with the police. Shared the footage with them, and they wrote down some info and walked over to her house and tried to get an explanation. She just yelled at them until they had heard enough and placed her under arrest, which didn't exactly calm her down as she was wailing and screeching like a banshee the whole way to the car, yelling some pretty harsh obscenities at me, the officers, and another neighbor as he walked out and asked me what's happening. As of right now, she's facing 1 charge of breaking and entering, 1 charge of vandalism, 1 charge of disorderly conduct, and 1 charge of a resisting arrest as she kicked one of the officers while they put her in the car. I have an appointment with a small claims lawyer tomorrow, and me and my dad have been laughing our asses off at how crazy she was. February 17th, 10:55 p.m. Her family has called me 3 times today trying to get me to drop charges, each person straying from slight entitled reasoning to inane babbling. I've informed each one that I was recording at the beginning of each call. Her son called and begged me to drop charges, when I told him, as any reasonable person would, no, as it could have hurt or killed me. I distinctly remember he called me a insensitive Republican dickhead and proceeded to call me quite a few slurs. I'm not a Republican, and when I reminded him I was recording the call, he went down the "I didn't give you consent to record me" path. He hung up as soon as I pointed out that I had a recording of this. Well done, OP. What a perfectly well-rounded story. Crazy neighbor at the beginning, rightful justice at the end, and finally someone has security cameras and is smart enough to record everything. I liked this story a lot, mainly because I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to forging and blacksmithing. Metalwork, in my opinion, is the coolest craft, and I've pretty much watched every episode of Forged in Fire, as well as spent most of my adolescent years playing Fable and RuneScape, to live out my dreams vicariously through a video game of being alive during medieval times. So if you like that stuff too, then you're welcome, and if you don't, then, well, off with thy head! Anyways, I'm gonna stop being a cringy nerd and say that is all for me today. I hope you enjoyed those 2 Entitled People stories. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. I truly appreciate when you do, and I will see you in the next Reddit stories. Bye!